So quite an irony right now that we're parked in front of a recycle bin here, isn't it? You know, we got to laugh about something, but there's more to this story. So late last night, I pulled a new Carfax myself. We've never done that. We had the one from the dealer. We thought that was adequate, but we actually ended up pulling a new Carfax. And this one here actually tells us something a little bit new. And now it's no wonder that these people are walking. No, they're running away from our car. This Honda Civic no longer seems to be of any interest to anybody because of the value of the accident. Now, remember, the original purchase price, what we paid for this car was just around $9,000, give or take, okay? When we bought this car. Now, this all matters. Why this all matters is because of the timestamp. Think about the dates here for a second. But first of all, I want to add that the new revised total amount of damage is $15,000, $14,750, as well as that original repair for $2,200. This car was actually damaged to the tune of $15,000. We're gonna go talk to that dealer here today, because now this is all starting to make much more sense. And I have to ask the question, when we bought the car from the dealer, they recognized that there was an accident on that Carfax. The question is, how old was that Carfax? Was that a Carfax pulled way prematurely? Was that Carfax current? When was that Carfax? And it was also pretty interesting that they had me initial and sign each one of those bullet points on that Carfax. Is that a way, a CYA, to have me accept the fact that I was buying a car that had accident history? There was nothing on that history. There was nothing on that Carfax about $15,000, but on the latest Carfax, there is a $15,000 hit. Remember, this car here, we paid $9,000 or $8,000, $9,000 for. Why wasn't this car written off? We paid full retail value for this car, and yet wholesale black book was probably only $5,000, $6,000, and the insurance company advocated for a repair of $15,000. How does that make any sense? There's something in this story that just doesn't add up. Now I've got to add to the timeline. If you look at the actual dates on here, the accident, the big one here was back in 2020, January 8th of 2020. Okay. Now, according to stats, when you Google it, it's actually not hard to find that information. When I check on my cell phone, I can literally pull that phone up right now. And I go on there and I Google and I say, how long for reports on Carfax to come to fruition, for it to be reported, accident history to be reported. And when you Google it, and I even confirmed, I've asked numerous people in the business, including a general manager at another dealership, who said that usually it's reported almost effective immediately. So the dollar amount should have been on there ASAP. So if this accident was reported on January 8th and on the other Carfax I showed $0, why wasn't that reported then? Why didn't we see that number? But remember, I bought the car in 2021, February or March. So that was a year after this accident history, a year. According to, when you Google and you ask how long before these accidents get reported, a lot of it actually comes down to, they say anywhere from 30, 60, 90 days, absolutely max. Now there's another little curveball in this conversation, because we all know what was going on back in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, there's a lot of people sent home. There was a lot of people pushing work off. I don't know if that was an impact, not sure. But I do know this much. From the time of this accident to the time we bought the car, over a year went by. And you're telling me that that $14,000 wouldn't have been reported on the date that I purchased this car? Absolutely. From the way I see this, that information should have been readily available to us the day that we bought the car a year later after this accident happened. So why didn't the dealer not share, or why was that information not available on that date when we bought it in February, March of 2021? Why is it not available? Well, you know what? Let's go down to the dealer and I'm going to have a quick chat with somebody there in some power, and I'm going to find out if they have a little bit more information for me, shall we? Let's go. So according to the manager over there that we spoke to, as you can tell, like a lot of dealerships, they tend to brush it off and shed the accountability. Now, where the issue began and ended, I mean, we're still trying to figure that out. But essentially the dealer, the manager I spoke to, said that he started just after the date stamp of the sale of the car that we bought. So he said that he joined after, so he would have no connection to that. That was the first response, was that he actually started employment there after the fact. There was also a reference to the fact that it was new ownerships with that particular business. And so I believe, in my own personal opinion, there's always a little bit of that, you know, CYA. There's always a little bit of CYA, but either way, I'm not totally sure exactly where to go, other than the fact that, I mean, the response seemed legit. You know, the manager I spoke to seemed that it makes sense. Like, it seemed like what he was saying kind of made sense, that they have access like we have access. So at the time that we bought the car, he's essentially saying that all that information was what they have is all they can go by. So when they pull a Carfax at the purchase date, like we did when we walked in there, assuming it was pulled at that time, then that's the same information we would have had. My next response was, okay, was it a trade-in or was it an auction unit? Because sometimes, you know, auction units you don't really have. They'll be looking for inventory. We know during that time it was hard for a lot of dealers to get inventory. We know they couldn't get access to a lot of used cars, because by the time we rolled into 2021-22, we know what the market was like. A lot of dealerships could not get used cars. They were trying to sell, of course, products, but they had nothing to sell. So a lot of these dealerships were trying to get anything, anywhere they could. Used cars, off the auction, trade-in. We even saw a lot of used cars that were trash that they wouldn't even have thought about. I mean, if you go back to, say, 2016, 2017, a lot of car dealers would have only sold vehicles that were, you know, within the last 3 or 4 years. But, you know, now they were getting to a point where they had no inventory, so they were selling just about anything they could get their hands on. And this seems to be the case, you know, during that 2020-21. You know, having older used cars on the car lots just seemed to, you know, make sense for them. At least they can sell something. And so it's hard to say. So it was hard to debate whether that car came from the auction or whether it came from a trade-in. But then he looked on the paperwork from the original bill of sale, and it looked like, based on the coding of that particular unit number, that it looked like it was likely a unit that was traded in. Well, then I said, so if it's a trade-in, you might actually have a little bit more history. What was the previous owner all about? Where did it come from? Was it local? You know, what was the whole story? Because quite often when you get a vehicle that's traded in, they have a little bit more information sometimes on their fingertips. So I started poking and prodding and asked those questions. You know, what kind of information would you have had? Did you have the information from the previous owner? Because ultimately, you know, a previous owner trade-in, sometimes just generally there's a little bit more history there. And so they really, the overarching conversation resulted in really not much more success from my perspective, other than the fact that he looked at this price and even agreed that how on earth would an insurance company advocate for a $15,000 repair on a vehicle that was only worth $8,000 or $9,000? How would the insurance company even allow that to happen? See, that's the bigger debate now. You know, is the insurance company involved in this? Is somehow the insurance, or somehow Carfax? Maybe the information wasn't available at the time, and maybe the dealer didn't have anything to do with this. Maybe the dealer actually legitimately didn't know. And I'm starting to feel that that's probably more the case, that the dealer themselves really didn't know more than we knew about it. And so where does that leave the rest of the story? Is it insurance? Is it a Carfax issue? Is it a documentation issue with Carfax, where they were a little slow on the uptake on getting that information and that data up to date? I don't know. Let's take another look at that Carfax, shall we? You know what, looking at this, here, I'm gonna take another peek here. There was something as well that was noted on here. On that date, it says damage reported, minor to moderate damage now. Damage to front and to right front. Front and right front, okay. So, first of all, is the vehicle safe now? $15,000 damage. Not only should have been written off, with $15,000 damage to a Honda, like, I get it. If you're dealing with a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, 15 grand is nothing to waste away. But when you're dealing with a vehicle like a Honda, it's actually pretty substantial to see that sort of damage. It said front and right front. So that's what we tried to look at to see after the fact. After I got that new revised Carfax, it said front and right front. Okay, so here's front and right front. What, a new fender? Maybe a new headlight? But interestingly, the headlight is just as faded as this side. So we know headlights can be kind of expensive, but why wouldn't that have been replaced? See, this is what's really weird to me. This here was not replaced because this looked just like the other side. Because remember, the accident was only a year before that I got my hands on it. So in a year's time, even if they put a brand new headlight in it, it wouldn't, you know, you would see the difference. So this headlight matched that headlight. So clearly this wasn't an issue. This probably wasn't an issue. So then what? Bumper? Well, maybe let's assume maybe they replaced a bumper cover. A couple $1,000s there. A new fender, a couple $1,000s there. Maybe a new wheel, another $1,000. Now you what, $5,000 plus paint and prep? You're at $6,000 or $7,000. New fender, new bumper cover, a new wheel. That's, how could you possibly add up to $15,000? Did you put a new door on it maybe? New door, possibly rocker damage, fender? That to me is a pretty substantial repair, and that should have been written off because these vehicles are unibody. And if you know unibodies basically where the chassis and the body are all sort of amalgamated into one. And so if you have damage on rockers or part of the unibody, then that damages the overall integrity of the quality of the vehicle, and it becomes potentially an unsafe condition. So if you're just dealing with a fender or a bumper cover, that's not $15,000. So how on earth did you get to a $15,000 repair? And even more so, how did that vehicle make it to repair? How did the insurance company let that go? We know what happened back in 2021, and we know that was a really weird time in history, really. So who knows the signatures and the check boxes that everybody was going through, but where do we go from here now? I mean, do we just keep driving this? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear the comments, please. Please, you've got to share this storyline as well with your friends. But honestly, where do we go from here? Here we have a vehicle that potentially saw up to $15,000, $17,000 damage on it. It runs nice, but I mean, what do we do with it? We can't sell it. Nobody's gonna want it. Nobody wants it already. We've proven that after they see the Carfax, it's done, and we have to disclose that. So we can't hide it like, you know, like some of those shady corner lots might do. Ultimately, I don't want to sell it to somebody knowing what I know, but I'd like to understand a little bit more. I'd like to understand what type of accident this was. I'd like to see the body shop invoice. I'd like to see a little bit more information. I wonder who I can reach out. But you know what? I'll tell you what. Be sure to check out that video. If you didn't see part one, definitely check out part one to this storyline. You're gonna understand how did we get to this point, as well as don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon. And don't forget the next video, which is really the next sequence of what do I do next.